You're exactly where you need to be. Today, an unprecedented recalibration is occurring beneath the surface of mainstream awareness. It's a phenomenon so foundational, so systematically pervasive, that by the time it generates widespread recognition, entire populations will have been operating under its influence for considerable time. The very fact that your attention has been drawn to this exploration through this particular medium indicates your proximity to the epicenter of this civilizational metamorphosis. Your presence here represents more than random browsing. You've been guided by an internal navigation system that has been detecting anomalies, sensing shifts in the fundamental coordinates of human experience long before conventional instruments register the change. The vast majority continues plotting their trajectory using reference points that are being systematically invalidated in real time, while they confidently advance toward destinations that no longer exist. They remain focused on optimizing strategies for challenges that belonged to previous decades, pursuing achievements within frameworks whose underlying assumptions are being quietly rewritten without public announcement. But something has been persistently unsettling your equilibrium lately, hasn't it? An intuitive recognition that the very foundation of consensus reality is becoming unstable, that the civilization you were educated to navigate is dissolving into something unrecognizable, though you cannot precisely articulate how or why. This isn't speculation about distant economic theories or hypothetical technological singularities. This concerns the immediate present moment. It's about the tangible bifurcation already in progress, systematically sorting humanity into two fundamentally distinct categories. Those who detect the emerging currents and those who remain oblivious. Those who adapt their instruments and those who become increasingly obsolete. Those who read atmospheric pressure changes and those who continue operating as if yesterday's meteorological reports retain validity. After analyzing the underlying data streams, the predictive indicators, and historical precedents for such comprehensive systemic overhauls, one pattern becomes unmistakable. We're not simply experiencing a period of accelerated modification. We're witnessing the final implementation phase of a foundational operating system upgrade for how human civilization functions. The legacy protocols governing ambition, community formation, security structures, and identity construction are all depreciating at rates that would trigger widespread panic if broadly comprehended. But this is characteristic of foundational transitions. They don't arrive with formal announcements or official declarations. They unfold gradually, incrementally, then suddenly crystallize as the new baseline reality. Like observing a coastline where the tide has been steadily retreating for hours. Most observers fail to notice the transformation until they look up and discover the ocean has receded hundreds of meters, exposing terrain that was always present but previously submerged. The reconfiguration being described is already actively unfolding. And if you can perceive it, if you can sense its presence, if some aspect of your intuitive awareness is resonating with this description, then you're among the advanced scouts witnessing this new paradigm emerge from the dissolution of the previous one. Consider a practical demonstration of this divergence. Perhaps you've encountered individuals who seem to operate according to different physical laws entirely. They navigate conflict, opportunity, and setbacks with a composure that appears almost otherworldly. It's not performance art or manufactured mindfulness. They seem to inhabit an alternative dimension of causality from those surrounding them. That's because they do. They've already migrated their consciousness to the updated operational framework, while the masses continue attempting to optimize their performance within a system that's approaching termination. Let me acknowledge what has become standard practice in such explorations. If these observations are creating recognition within your own experience, and you sense this investigation deserves continuation and deeper development, the most powerful way to nurture that is through your active participation. This isn't simply about engagement metrics, but about generating signals that meaningful transformation is valued and supported. This transition isn't being orchestrated from corporate boardrooms or legislative chambers or academic institutions. It's taking root in the fertile soil of individual awareness, one consciousness at a time, during moments of profound dissatisfaction, when the cost of maintaining obsolete identity structures becomes unbearable. It emerges when someone recognizes that the ladder they've been ascending is positioned against a building that's being systematically demolished. It manifests when individuals stop seeking collective permission to live authentically and begin engineering their own reality from fundamental principles. What's extraordinary is how those who sense this approaching wave begin modifying their life trajectories months, even years, before the logic becomes apparent to others. They start making decisions that appear irrational to their social networks and family systems. They begin investing their resources in assets that seem worthless to mainstream evaluation. They start disengaging from career paths that others consider prestigious because they can already feel those paths leading toward a world that's ceasing to exist. This is where the implications become truly profound. The shift isn't merely about adapting to new external conditions. It's about the fundamental source code of human perception undergoing forced evolution. Imagine if your visual cortex suddenly developed the capacity to perceive an additional primary color. Everything would appear different. Spatial relationships would transform. Your entire world would be recontextualized. Except this isn't happening to sensory apparatus. It's happening to consciousness itself, to how we interpret reality, construct relationships, assess probability, and define meaning. Most people are still attempting to process a high-definition world using dial-up infrastructure, wondering why everything feels sluggish and fragmented, why the results they generate no longer correspond to the effort they invest. They're trying to resolve systemic issues with behavioral modifications, which is equivalent to attempting to fix software bugs by polishing the monitor screen. It represents a fundamental categorical error. The individuals aligning with this transition have already initiated their own upgrade protocols. Not through superior intelligence or spiritual discipline or inherited advantage, but because their discomfort with the obsolete paradigm reached a critical threshold where releasing attachment became the only viable option. They ceased clinging to beliefs, identities, and institutions that were actively constraining their developmental potential. They embraced the unsettling possibility that their entire understanding of success might be dangerously incomplete. When you create that level of openness, when you allow for that degree of radical vulnerability, the new logic begins integrating organically. You don't need to hunt for it or master it through intellectual effort. It installs automatically, like a fractal expanding according to its inherent mathematical properties. You begin recognizing causal relationships you were previously blind to, grasping concepts that seemed paradoxical, and solving problems that were formerly intractable. But there's something rarely discussed about being positioned at the forefront of a cognitive revolution of this magnitude. The isolation, not from physical solitude, but from perceiving a reality that isn't yet shared by your immediate environment. You're making decisions based on updated physics, while everyone else continues operating according to Newtonian mechanics. And to them, it appears as if you're violating fundamental laws of reality. They cannot comprehend why you aren't more distressed by circumstances that cause them enormous anxiety. They fail to understand why you're not pursuing the same success metrics they prioritize. This represents the admission price for pioneering any major paradigm shift. You must navigate an interval where your new mode of being lacks social validation, where your choices appear nonsensical even to those who care about and respect you. But this interval is temporary. Eventually, the shift becomes so self-evident that it becomes the new consensus. And suddenly, the decisions that once seemed eccentric are recognized as prescient. The people who appeared detached are acknowledged as the new leadership. The question isn't whether this recalibration will occur. It's already in motion. The question is whether you'll align with it intentionally and strategically, or whether you'll be carried along by it reactively once conscious choice is no longer available. Currently, millions of people are unconsciously resisting this transition with maximum intensity. Not from maliciousness or inadequate intelligence, but because their entire sense of identity is anchored to the predictability of the familiar world. They've invested their entire lives mastering the rules of a game that's being retired, and the prospect of a new game feels like an existential threat. They cling to familiar dysfunction because the freedom of the unknown appears far too chaotic. You can observe it in their thought patterns. The way they insist on applying outdated frameworks to novel challenges. The way they intensify efforts on strategies yielding diminishing returns instead of questioning the validity of the strategy itself. The way they become indignant when reality no longer conforms to their expectations. They resemble expert navigators who insist on using obsolete star charts, angry at the stars for moving, rather than accepting that the vessel has sailed into a new hemisphere entirely. But then there are others, and you may be among them, who are beginning to experience something completely different. A peculiar sense of equilibrium amidst expanding chaos, like discovering the eye of a hurricane, not because you're escaping the storm, but because you've aligned with its rotational center. The perspective shift is simultaneously exhilarating and vertigo-inducing. These are the individuals who are starting to grasp that the rules were never rules at all. They were simply collective agreements, shared assumptions about how reality must function. And when a critical mass of people withdraws their consent, when they begin operating from a new set of core assumptions, the fabric of reality itself reconfigures around the new gravitational center. This is why timing represents the most critical variable. When you're among the first to recognize such a shift, you get to participate in authoring what emerges next. Instead of merely reacting to a world designed by others, you become a systems architect of the new reality. Instead of being a tenant, you become a developer. Your insights matter because you were present at the foundational stage, because you perceived the blueprint before the structure was constructed. But being early requires operating on deep intuition, even when quantitative data isn't yet available to support it. You have to act on patterns you perceive rather than on facts you can prove to a committee. You have to accept being profoundly misunderstood temporarily by those still invested in the obsolete architecture. The shift being described isn't a phenomenon of some distant century. It's the defining event of this decade, these years, these exact months. The rate of transformation is beginning to compound exponentially. You can observe it in how public discourse is fragmenting, in how people are reevaluating truths they once held as sacred, in how legacy institutions are exhibiting signs of terminal decay while decentralized networks emerge almost spontaneously. Consider how concepts like career, education, and community are discussed today versus a decade ago. Notice the rapid mainstreaming of ideas that were considered fringe just 36 months prior. The velocity of this transformation is accelerating, and most people are too consumed by the daily task of maintaining their balance to notice that the ground itself is tilting. This acceleration is generating unprecedented opportunities, but they're visible only to those who have recalibrated their perception. It's like being on a train that suddenly accelerates to bullet speed. If you're bracing against the direction of travel, you'll be thrown against the back wall. But if you align with the acceleration, you can walk down the aisle with ease, using the train's momentum to amplify your own movement. The individuals who will prosper in this era of radical transformation are not the most credentialed or the most funded. They are the most adaptive. They are the ones who can remain fluid, who can jettison obsolete beliefs without ceremony, who see immense opportunity in what others label as chaos. They recognize that a system breaking down is always a precursor to a new system breaking through. And they align themselves with the breakthrough, not the breakdown. Right now, while the majority is still attempting to master the final, most complex levels of a game that's about to be unplugged, a historic opportunity exists to step onto a completely new field of play. To stop reacting and start originating. But this period of transition has a finite window. In any systemic shift, there's a crucial interval where the early adopters gain a compounding advantage, where being a year ahead is equivalent to being a decade ahead, where those who perceive the shift early claim the most fertile territory in the new landscape, while there's still open space to innovate, build, and create before the great migration arrives. The shift is upon us. The only remaining question is how you'll engage with this knowledge. How you'll leverage your position not merely to weather what's unfolding, but to actively shape it. How you'll use this moment of systemic rupture to finally grant yourself permission to become the person you were before the world told you who you were supposed to be. Because that's the ultimate gift of these moments. Not just a change in the external world, but the space for profound internal change. The crumbling of external structures provides the perfect opportunity to shed the internal ones you've outgrown. So, if you've journeyed to this point, if this exploration has landed not as new information, but as deep confirmation of something you already sensed, then the conclusion is self-evident. Your presence here isn't accidental. You're here because you're an integral part of this vanguard, the distributed network of consciousness that senses the future before it becomes the past. The shift doesn't require your approval. It's not waiting for you to feel prepared. It's unfolding with or without your participation, re-architecting our world at a velocity that will disorient those still trying to find their place on yesterday's map. But you possess an advantage they don't. You have foresight. You have the capacity to see the pattern as it emerges, rather than merely analyzing it in retrospect. This is your inflection point, not to brace for distant change, but to step into the paradigm that's already crystallizing around you. To cease hesitating on the threshold of your own evolution and finally embody the truth you've always carried within. And in conclusion, let me offer a small exercise. If you've reached this point and felt an internal shift in perspective, anchor that recognition in the tangible world. Write these words in the comments. I see the pattern emerging. Let this serve not as a simple comment, but as a personal declaration, the point from which your new navigation begins. The people who will define this era will not be those who waited for certainty or consensus. They will be those who acted on their own clarity, even when they couldn't fully articulate it. They will be those who initiated their own movement when it was still a choice, not a reaction. This message is reaching you at this precise moment for a reason, because you're meant to be an architect of what's coming. The only remaining step is for you to decide if you'll trust the knowledge you already possess and begin the work.